All right, we're going to start record then. And we'll go ahead and get started.
So do we need to turn our videos off, or does it just automatically shift over to?
No, you can leave your video on and your mic on, right? I'm going to, field the questions, so there may be something that pops in because my screen is, loud. And so, so I may turn my mic off periodically, and hopefully everyone knows the door is closed because I'm on a webinar. But otherwise, yeah, you're fine. You can stay on the whole time. Yeah. Okay. And of course, we'd like it that way so that you can, pop in with, comments. So it's really, in terms of what people understand, a dean's panel, like a fireside chat. So this is very much your presentations, your comments, your advice is what they're looking for. Okay. Mm-hmm. So with that, we'll begin. Let me first welcome everyone that's on the line. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. Let me also say that if you have any questions, be sure to submit your question in the Q&A box. We are not going to respond to items in the chat box because we expect a pretty large number of folks attending. We have over 300 people registered for this session. And as a result of differing schedules. Some inquiries were, can I register even though I may not attend and I may want the recording? Because we are recording, that's definitely an option. So be sure to send your questions into the Q&A box and we'll respond to them there. My name is Nicole Norfless. I'm here with the Council for Opportunity and Education. And I'm going to launch a poll just so we can get a sense of who is on the line so far. And we may reinstitute this poll later in the webinar as well. But for the 71 of you who are here, we'll get the poll launched now. Because this session is very much geared towards students as well as McNair directors and advisors, we want to get a sense of how many students are here and how we can really focus those comments on their concerns, as well as for you advisors, the concerns that you may have for your students. Let me say that before we begin, I want to thank Suzanne Ortega, who's the president of the Council for Graduate Schools, who arranged and reached out to these three deans. And we at COE are grateful for the partnership that we have with CGS and really thank the deans who are here. The session, as you all may know, is really to address how graduate schools are thinking about the application process in 2020, 2021, and beyond, considering the pandemic. Given the impact of the pandemic, it's currently disproportionately impacting low-income students and communities of color, which then, as we see as a result, the potential disruptions for graduate aspirations and plans that students may have is extremely worrisome. And we want to support that continuation of graduate school. So this webinar is the opportunity to help students and again, you advisors and McNair directors on how graduate programs are thinking about the admission process as well as the holistic file and the success for graduate students. So we have three deans here, and they will present in this order, but first let me introduce them. Dr. James Marshall, who's at Fresno State University, Dr. Julie Coonrod, who's at the University of New Mexico, and Dr. Carol Giannetti, who's transitioning from the University of Santa Barbara to Abu Dhabi, NYU Abu Dhabi's campus, and we welcome them all. If you all could provide an introduction, I just want to say, for me, we would be here for a couple days, all right? Each of these deans has exceptional background, not only within professional organizations, within their academic areas of expertise, but also relative to their commitment for student success. And I think that's why you have a superb panel before you to speak to these issues. So I'll turn it over first to Dr. Marshall.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Marshall. I'm Dean of Research and Graduate Studies here at Fresno State. So let me tell you a little bit about Fresno State. Fresno State has approximately 25,000 students, with almost 12% of those in some kind of post-baccalaureate program, either a master's degree or one of our 3 professional doctorates. We're a really diverse campus. We have an HSI designation, a Hispanic Serving Institution designation, and also an ANAPISI designation, which is Asian, Native American, and Pacific Islander Serving Institution. And we're what the Carnegie classification is called Doctoral Professional University. It's what we used to call an R3 or a Research 3 institution. We have almost 70% first-gen students at Fresno State and a non-white population of over 81%. So our campus actually reflects the diversity of the community that we serve. We also have a 1,000-acre farm, is what you can see in my background right now. The crop in this particular image is wine grapes, and we have a bachelor's and a master's degree in enology, which is winemaking. And we were the first campus, I was telling the colleagues on the panel, we were the first campus in the nation to have a commercial winery. We're also, though, very active in the McNair program. McNair has been on our campus for 27 years. We've had over 600 McNair scholars participating since 1993, with 99% of them earning bachelor's degrees and 85% being admitted to graduate school. Right now, currently, we have 28 McNair scholars in doctoral programs across the country. And we've graduated over 75 with doctoral degrees. In fact, 13 McNair scholars are actually professors now at Fresno State. So they've come full circle. But let me talk just briefly about some fall admissions in this pandemic era that we're in. Surprisingly, our enrollment for undergraduates this fall is at a record high. If everybody shows up come August 17th, our start date, we will have a record high number of freshmen and a record high number of transfer students. Now, as for graduate enrollment, we are actually really steady, about the same as last year. But all indications is that we'll have significant increases in the fall of 2021. What we tend to see is when the economy goes down, graduate admissions go up. And so we're gearing up for that possibility right now. And because of the COVID crisis that we're in, we have temporarily suspended the GRE and other admissions tests like GMAT, all the way through fall of 2021. So virtually all of our grad programs now use a holistic approach to graduate admissions. Nearly half of those have eliminated admissions testings as a requirement completely. So with holistic admissions, things like letters of support, personal statements, and in our case, diversity statements become really important. And now you have a unique opportunity to incorporate how COVID is shaping your academic preparation and your career aspirations as you craft those statements. It's a unique opportunity. We know that COVID differentially affects individuals and families. This is your opportunity to describe that in those letters, in those personal statements, and even in your diversity statements as you're applying for graduate school. We're also seeing more students here at Fresno State wanting or needing to stay near home. So we see an emerging resurgence of interest in what we call our 4+1 degree programs, especially in the STEM fields. These are degree programs where students extend their stay at Fresno State and complete not just the bachelor's degree, but with an additional year, a master's degree as well, before thinking about then applying on to a doctoral program. So again, they're wanting to or needing to stay at home, and the degree programs have shifted their emphasis in order to provide those opportunities. So with that, let me turn it over to my colleague from University of New Mexico.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. So I'm Julie Coonrod, the Dean of Graduate Studies at the University of New Mexico. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the University of New Mexico, which is located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We are in a high desert climate with lots of sunshine, but not near as hot as Arizona. We tend to have get hot in the middle of the day, but then it always cools off in the evening because of that desert climate. UNM has a number of designations as well. So we are both a minority serving institution and a Hispanic serving institution. We have the Carnegie designation of Research 1, or highest research activity, and we also have the Carnegie designation of community engagement. And so one of a handful that has that particular combination. Minority serving means that our undergrad population is more than 50% minority. 58% of our undergrad population is minority. 49% of our undergrad population is Hispanic. At the graduate level, we have typically 30% Hispanic graduate students and 4% Native American graduate students. We typically have next to highest or highest Native American PhD graduates each year. At the University of New Mexico, our graduate programs are really decentralized. So most of our programs do practice holistic admissions, but it varies tremendously whether programs require the GRE or not. So while some programs have waived the GRE requirement for this particular year, other programs have not, and it varies a lot from program to program. So we really encourage applicants to reach out to the individual programs. Our actual application has links to graduate program advisors that you can ask direct questions of, and it varies a lot. We have most of the graduate programs that you would expect, as well as law school and a med school at the University of New Mexico. Let's see. I think that covers the basics, but I did want to make the point that at UNM, it really is decentralized. So we really encourage people to reach out to their program and ask them questions. And one program may require the GRE, the next program may not. Although I do believe all of our programs are going to be very understanding on students that took a credit, no credit option during the spring COVID semester. I think all of our graduate programs are completely expecting that. And I will leave it to my colleague, Dr. Giannetti.
Well, hi, everybody. And it's so great to have so many people on this webinar. And it's really grateful to Nicole and also to the Council of Graduate Students for the invitation to be able to address you all today. So my name is Carol Giannetti and I'm from UC Santa Barbara. As Nicole said, I'm going to be moving over to the NYU campus, New York University in Abu Dhabi in about a month's time. And so that's very exciting, but we have a new interim graduate dean appointed, Lila Rupp from the Department of Feminist Studies, and she's going to be really great in this role. So I know that I'm leaving the university and the graduate division in good hands. So UC Santa Barbara is one of 10 different universities in the University of California system. We have about 25,000 students, including 3,000 graduate students. Of those, about 80% are doctoral students and about 20% are master's programs. So like UNM, we have a Research 1 designation. So we have very high levels of research activity and a highly awarded faculty, including 6 Nobel Prizes and lots of other prizes as well. We're known especially, I'd say, for our programs in sciences and engineering, but we have excellent programs across the university. So for example, we have the top program in sex and gender studies, both through our Department of Feminist Studies as well as in sociology. We have a really fine school of environmental science and management. We have really great work going on in the humanities. We're great in religious studies. In the digital humanities, we have a wonderful school of education. So there's just lots of variety here. One thing that characterizes UC Santa Barbara is that we have a very interdisciplinary campus where people work together across disciplines to really address the major challenges that are facing the world. And so we like to say that interdisciplinary collaboration is in our DNA. It's really sort of how we kind of grew up as a UC campus, and we include lots of opportunities for interdisciplinary interaction for our graduate students. We are a Hispanic serving institution. We're also Anapisi serving, like Fresno. We have a very strong commitment to access, diversity, and inclusion, and supporting students from all backgrounds. So this year, if you look at our incoming graduate student class, 25% identify as underrepresented minorities. So we're very, pleased with that. We've been working to build our underrepresented minority graduate student population, and then build lots of programs to support those students and as they go, so that everybody is committed to their success. So we're interested in building a strong sense of community across our graduate programs. And so we have all kinds of ways to bring people together, even if they're in different departments. And we have a number of affinity groups that are groups of graduate students that share particular identities, that work together and that share their academic work with each other. So we have a really vibrant atmosphere for intellectual exchange. I know a lot of students have questions about financial aid. I just wanted to say that we offer a variety of types of financial aid for our graduate students. The vast majority of our doctoral students are given a 5-year package of support upon entry that will pay for the tuition, fees, and health insurance in addition to the stipend or salary. Most of them are employed as teaching assistants or research assistants. So you can support yourself as a doctoral student at UC Santa Barbara. For the master's programs, it really varies depending upon the program. So you need to check for the individual program to see what kinds of financial support that they offer. In terms of admissions, like my colleagues here at UC Santa Barbara, we have been really advancing this holistic review for many years. And I'm glad that we have been, because I think it's going to be more important than ever this year because of the pandemic. And I think that our departments are already used to kind of looking at the whole package of the graduate application in order to really see, where do we find in here evidence for that promise of success? Where do we see that people are, dedicated, that people will, have persistence, that people go above and beyond, that they're creative, that they can write. All of these things are things that you find evidence for in different parts of the application. And I think that's what we've been telling our departments to look to do and to how to evaluate applications for 5 or 6 years now. With regards to the GRE, most of our programs have suspended this. For many, that's a permanent thing. But some of them also just changed it this particular year because of the pandemic and the impact that it's had. And so that's about 75% of our programs that will not be requiring the GRE for the coming year. So you can find that list on our website, or you could check with the individual department to find out about particular programs. In terms of your own experiences around the pandemic, I think it's really important that students do address this in their graduate application. For us, we have a personal achievement section, which would be just the right place to put that. That's a section where you can highlight your unique experiences, challenges, and triumphs. And we want to know both about how COVID has affected you positively and negatively. I mean, both sides of it. We want to understand the broader context so that we can really understand who you are, and then just make sure that we can support you to the level of success. And then I'll just close by saying that also UC Santa Barbara is a jewel. So it's a beautiful beachfront campus with a very strong environmental focus, or a very green campus. So pretend that I'm actually sitting here as opposed to from my dining room, but I'm actually sitting here. If you were to walk behind me for about 2 minutes, your feet would be in the Pacific Ocean. So just to give you a sense, we are a beachfront campus, beautiful place. So I hope you will take a look at that. And if you don't come interested to hear it for graduate school, we hope that you come at some other point because we want to welcome all scholars.
Thank you.
Turn it back over to you, Nicole.
All right, thanks. Yeah, now who can resist the beach, okay? Talk about holding out, all right. you've actually, all of you have addressed one of the key questions that we had in terms of the importance of standardized test scores in the application process. So let me move on to a question that's come up. And again, for those who have joined, be sure to list your question under a Q&A. We are not going to address questions in the chat box, all right? And I may pop off because I see there's a number of people who are having some difficulty getting on, so I'm going to help my colleagues with that. But one of the questions that's popped up that I think we could address is, she asked, and this is Taylor Brown, and hopefully you don't mind, Taylor, that I mentioned your name. She asks, in regards to students who've already graduated and are applying to graduate school, please provide some advice to give the students that plan to use initially their 2020 year to build their resume for graduate admissions, the volunteering, the research, etc. But those students, as a result of not being able to do it as a result of the pandemic, how do they express that in the required statements, for example? So some advice on how those students can address their resume building and their statements. Anyone want to go first? All right, James, I think I saw your mouth moving, but I can't hear you.
Is it Julie?
There you go. Julie, okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to go ahead and answer. I think you started to answer it in the question that you want to really address this in a personal statement, and I think faculty that are reviewing your application are going to be really impressed that you were planning on volunteer hours and that you had plans for things you wanted to do while you were getting prepared for graduate school. So how did you spend your time? If you had planned on volunteering in a lab that wasn't open, or you had planned doing something that you weren't able to do, how did you spend your time? Did you find an alternative way? I think faculty would really be interested in knowing how you might have connected when your plans changed. But certainly addressing it head on in your personal statement would be great.
Yeah, I would agree that really, being transparent is the best policy here, I think. What was it that you did? And there could very well be lots of things. And I know many students are currently doing things, caring for elderly grandparents, for instance. Doing that kind of thing is keeping them at home where they don't have that opportunity to maybe be out in the community, providing some kind of volunteerism or even working in the lab on campus. I know our campus is just beginning to open up our labs now, just in the last month or so. And it's on a very, it's on a phased approach. So we are getting students and particularly graduate students back into the lab. But for the most part, that hasn't been the case for many, many months. So what have people been doing? Describing what you have been doing during that time is important for the reviewers to hear.
Great. There's a question, how are schools paying or helping graduate students in terms of handling, I would imagine, TAs, GA, and other positions that may be reduced or gone, given that classes are now online for some universities as a result of COVID this coming school year?
So,
Want to go, Karen?
sure. Well, how about if I jump in on that one? So it's been a real priority for us to make sure that our students continue to have their financial support provided. And so even classes that are online, the students are still working as TAs, and that hasn't, if anything, we have more TAs now than we had in the face-to-face context. I think we have added to our TA roles but they just have to work in this other online environment. And then in terms of our graduate student researchers, all of our PIs have really been committed to making sure that the students continue to be supported, and we've been getting a lot of input from the various funding agencies that provide the research grants that should be our priority, and we have been continuing that to be the priority. And so a lot of the graduate student researchers have been given different kinds of work to do. So for example, instead of being in the lab itself physically, they might be doing literature reviews, they might be doing statistical analysis, They might be learning how to draft a grant proposal for the next round of funding, or various other types of research activity beyond the lab itself. Like Jim was saying about Fresno, at UC Santa Barbara, we are slowly opening up to our research labs, and so more and more students are getting back in, but it's, I think we're probably at about between 10 and 15% right now of the labs. The people are in the labs as we typically have during enrollment time.
I can add that very similarly, that not only are our TAs continue to be supported, we have provided training this summer for almost 900 instructors. That would include tenured and tenure track faculty members that are teaching, as well as lecturers and TAs. So TAs were included in that training. They were actually paid during that time for the training as well. And in fact, that continues all the way up till August 17th when we start classes. So, and given the sheer numbers of undergraduates we're anticipating, we may actually be hiring additional TAs this year.
Wow, talk about need. There you go. All right, perfect. I think, Yasmin, in terms of your question about the impact of COVID-19 in the diversity statement, I'm guessing you're inquiring the impact in the diversity statement, how it applies to all graduate programs. And I think they mentioned, everyone's talked about how to address the students' application, but if I'm understanding this differently as something that hasn't been addressed, just please rewrite, give us another question. I'm going to say that one's probably been answered live, all right? There's a question about mentors and letters of recommendation. So let me ask the first one. And it might be appropriate at this time that while I ask that question, let's get a sense of how many students. In terms of our first poll, who's participating, 49% are currently undergrad. We've got almost 30% that are McNair directors, and the next top number are McNair advisors. 4%, 3 are currently graduated McNair scholars. But what I'd like to do is now implement our second poll in terms of student information to get a sense of your current status, and it's multiple choice. Have you graduated? Are you looking to enroll the fall 2020? Or do you have concerns about that enrollment? So if you could complete those students, we'd really appreciate it. As I turn to the question is, what do you wish your mentors had told you when you went into higher education, into your programs? So any comments about this might even impact how you select a mentor. Comments?
I'll have to say that's a great question. That's, I've never had anybody ask that particular question in a forum like this before. So I think it's really great that you did. So my mentor was great at teaching me everything about research, but didn't teach me anything else about how to be a faculty member and what it was really like being a faculty member. And so I think that is something that I really wish that my mentor had taught me. So I'm assuming, what I'm thinking now about is my doctoral mentor in terms of my faculty position, but perhaps what this question is addressing your faculty mentor as an undergraduate. As you move into graduate school, do you have a sense of that from the question, Nicole?
I'm thinking it's particularly since we've got so many undergraduates, probably a faculty mentor in going into graduate school. Correct.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think there's another way to look at it as well, and that is not just to think about having a mentor, but maybe having multiple mentors. Excellent. And one of the things we do here at Fresno State in number of programs, particularly our STEM programs, is we have what we call near peer mentors. In other words, not these professors that have been there for 30 years like me, but instead someone who is either a more experienced graduate student, or in many cases, a recent new hire into the instructor ranks. And so someone that is not so distant from where you are in your particular point in your career. And so having multiple mentors with at least some being closer to where you happen to be right now. I think we found some success with that. And the students that have participated in these near peer mentoring relationships have found a lot of value in that.
The University of New Mexico has a project for New Mexico graduates of color where we pair mentors and mentees based on a survey they fill out that is sort of like, I joke that it's kind of an eHarmony type of survey where they pair people based on a number of different things, and it gets in that sort of near peer mentoring that Dr. Marshall is talking about. When I think about something that I wish I would have had, I felt like my mentors took for granted that I must know a lot of things I didn't know, just about process and what graduate school means and what it means to finish graduate school and what the options are. So while the subject itself, they were good mentors on my particular subject, which is water resources engineering, I felt like they really took for granted that I knew the basics of what I was doing, and I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I could kind of circle back, I think for me, one of the main things that I wish that my undergraduate mentor kind of prepared me better for in graduate school is really learning how to create a supportive community of people. Because I felt like when I was in graduate school, I was pretty lonely in many ways. I was sort of by myself and it was a different time and kind of a different paradigm for graduate instruction. But I wish that I learned more about how to reach out and to create a broader network and a broader sense of support while I was there, how to connect with other students who are other graduate students, especially outside of my department, how to find different faculty members within and outside of my department to work with. And I think that that's something that we really work on with our graduate students at UC Santa Barbara, and I believe at my colleagues' institutions as well, is really making sure that students are more connected and that it's not such a kind of lonely experience going through graduate school as it was at one point.
If you could, if each of you would elaborate, that's one of the questions I was going to ask. So, the question is, how is your university fostering that sense of community for entering cohorts, particularly since, a lot of that may be done virtually these days. And I think it kind of piggybacks with the question that's been posted, since many institutions may be virtual, some may be in person. What are the concerns for students in terms of their academic achievement, but that community question as well? How do those come together?
I can talk, say here at Fresno State, our 3 doctoral programs, they're professional doctorate programs, they're cohorted. And so are many of our master's degree programs. And by virtue of the cohort nature of them, they admit one group of students each year. Those second year students, in almost all cases where there's a cohorted program, the second year students mentor a first year student. All 3 doc programs have a very strong mentoring program like that, but even many of our master's degree programs. So if you're looking to apply, and if it's a cohort-based admissions process for the degree program you're interested in, look for that opportunity to be mentored by someone who has, within the last year, experienced that same thing you're about to do.
Great. Any other
I've seen few programs have kind of what I would call a COVID silver lining. So whether they're cohort programs or not, we have programs that are really concerned about connecting new students that are able to take their entire or most of their schedule online. And so in an effort to really want to connect those students, we have some programs that wouldn't have had a formal mentoring program before that are very purposefully pairing their students up, their incoming students with established students. So just to get those students connected.
So I'm thinking, go ahead. Mhm.
I was just going to say that this year, I mean, we've always worked hard to, provide a sense of community. And we have, for example, a Facebook group for students. As soon as they submit their statements of intent to register, they get into this Facebook group with all the other ones and they connect in great ways. And then we do a number of different kinds of events prior to orientation and during orientation. But this year we started it 2 months earlier, all of those events, so that students would have an opportunity even sooner to be able to create connections and make those start those critical relationships that are going to support them in graduate school.
Perfect. I was going to ask if that was formal or informal, but I think you all have covered both formal and informal. As a result, there's a question that came up. So Deanna, I think we've covered that in terms of the support opportunities for graduate students. They're actually both formal and informal with the department, with the institution. And I think what each of our deans has said that you definitely want to reach out to the department as well. Okay. The next question, I think it gets back to this one anonymous. Will it greatly affect my chances of admission if only one of my letters of recommendation is strong? What are your sentiments?
I think it might. So I would work really hard at finding 3 people that you feel will give you a strong recommendation. You get to choose who those people are. So sometimes they just want 1 or 2 that's related to the academic program, and sometimes a 3rd one can be actually a personal reference. So I encourage you to look for 3 people that you feel pretty certain are going to give you strong recommendations.
Thank you. I see head nods. I think that's consistent. You definitely want more than one recommendation.
Don't think that those letters of recommendation alone are sufficient. I think, like I said earlier, in a holistic admissions environment, letters of recommendation may play a role, but it's not the only role. It's not the only thing they're looking for. And many graduate admissions committees are they're very familiar with letters of recommendation that say this student is in the top 10% of all students I've ever had. And you get letter after letter after letter that's always in the top 10%. I never hear somebody say, well, he's probably in the top 35%, or she's in the top 40% of students I've had, which would still be pretty good. But so letters of recommendation sometimes are taken with a bit of a grain of salt, given that you tend to hear the same thing over and over again. It's when that letter of recommendation is very personalized and can talk specifically about an activity or a disposition or something that you as a student possess that differentiates you from somebody else. And those are the best letters of recommendation, I think.
Great.
So to the question that's come up, how can graduate school committees weigh other materials without GRE? I think you've heard some, the letters of recommendation, the details about the student's letter, telling that story, understanding where the student is in terms of their research. Is there anything else that we might add?
I would say one thing that I think really makes an application strong is if it's very clear that the student knows about that particular department and the faculty in the particular department and makes the case that that is a good place for them intellectually. that they want to work with those particular faculties because of their longstanding interests. What I think that can turn off an admissions committee is if you get the sense that the person has wrote one letter of application and then sent the same exact letter to 12 different schools. That's just, you can tell when you're reading these things, whether or not someone took the time to really look at who the faculty are, what they do, what they emphasize, and shown through their application that what is offered, what is unique about that particular department is exactly what is going to promote that student and connect with that student. And so that there's going to be that strong connection there. I think that those are the really appealing cases to many admissions committees together with the rest. So the more that you can make that case, the stronger your application will be.
Thank you.
I read a letter of recommendation just the other day. It was shared online. It was redacted, so we didn't know who it was from. But it talked about applying to California State University, Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Las Vegas is in bad. It's not
Cool.
in California. So somebody cut and pasted, but they missed the Las Vegas part when they cut and pasted that letter. It's really evident. It's so evident that grad coordinator shared it with other grad coordinators, kind of as, look at what this student applied to. So be careful about that.
That's great. Sure. So I think we've addressed those top two questions. I'm going to take us in a different direction. And I think it's really critical because some of the factors that affect students' continued matriculation is what's happening at home. Are they caregivers for their family? Do they have children? Is it important for them to work to support the family? And so these questions, a couple of questions ask what type of support systems are available for students if they have family, to take care of family, and similarly for students that may be parents and have children of their own at home. Could you provide us with some information about those issues?
I'm going to say I think that's a really hard question. So all of our universities are going to have support mechanisms in place. So I'm guessing we all have ethnic centers that provide a number of different support. We have a child care center that provides support. We have a women's studies group. So we have a number of support mechanisms in place. But when students are deciding whether to leave family at this time, I think it's a really personal decision and one that only they can make for themselves. And that said, I think everyone's being generous on some policy things like taking a leave of absence or that sort of thing. So there are some things in place that are due to COVID, but I think that's a hard question for us to answer at an institutional level. We all try to provide support, but it may or may not be what particular students need at this time.
And I can add from a technological perspective. For years, when we talk about best practices for online instruction, we would often incorporate some aspect of synchronous learning, primarily so that a faculty member could engage, personally and in real time with a group of students or an individual student. Now, in our trainings that we're doing now, we're encouraging, looking for opportunities for asynchronous activities as well. And it's primarily because of just what you raised, is that for many graduate students, it is particularly challenging to be able to sit down at a computer between 3 and 5 p.m. in the afternoon. Just because that course happens to be delivered entirely on Zoom. And while Zoom is a great tool, it's no longer a best practice for COVID virtual instruction. Mm-hmm. It's a useful tool, but if it entirely replaces the instruction, it is not useful for many students. And so we're seeing this pivot not only in what we're looking at as best practice for online instruction, but then also in looking at, and by the way, this applies to faculty members as well. Students have to recognize many of the faculty that you're working with have that same situation in their own home. They have kids that are no longer in California. In most counties in California, kids will not be starting school face-to-face, K-12 school face-to-face. That impacts a huge number of our faculty. And so to say, oh, my class is only offered from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. one day a week, you know, that's really challenging for the faculty member as well as for the student. And so we're seeing changes in the way that we capitalize on the technology in order to help meet some of those needs.
To the person that asked about the virtual spaces, that might be something to Dr. Marshall's point, that is going to not only vary by institution, but vary based upon the faculty as well as those demands. Because as mentioned, a virtual space is also going to depend upon the faculty that has the time, and with everyone's schedules differently these days. It's really going to depend on the institution, but that is definitely a question to ask relative to a student's institution, the institution that the student is considering. I'd also say that in terms of that first week, that might be something to consider. There's a question, what do you feel is absolutely necessary for a student to do in their first week to lead them on the path to success?
Love that question too. I think that, you know, creating relationships and community within your immediate department, making sure that you understand what the requirements are and when the various classes are done, asking lots and lots of questions, I think is going to be really critical. And then I would also say that the other thing I would encourage you to think about is, where is your graduate degree going to take you? What are your various options and opportunities for a career? And how do you make sure that your graduate degree is going to be one that is going to take you to career? Because when you get out of graduate school, you want two things. You want your graduate degree and you want a career both. And so you should think about preparing and aiming for both of those things simultaneously. So having overt discussions with the faculty members in your department about your career plans, I think, and the different opportunities you have. You don't have to know when you go into enter into graduate school on day one exactly what you're going to do. You might want to keep your options open, but you want to know what those options are. And the more that you can kind of expose yourself to, then the more doors will be open, and who knows where they will take you.
And I could say, I think you need to start this semester with an attitude of empathy and compassion for everyone around you. Your peers within the classes that you're taking, as well as with your instructors. Everybody, you know, COVID is affecting everybody. It affects everybody differently, but it is affecting everybody. And if you go in with this attitude that I have all of this, that all of these needs, and how are you going to meet, how are all these needs going to be met, without also saying, hey, I'm not alone in this. I know that my fellow students have a variety of needs, some that are different than me. I know that you as my instructor, you're in this situation too. How are you dealing with it? But having an attitude of empathy and compassion, I think it'll be recognized by your peers as well as by your faculty. And it'll be appreciated, I think. One of the things we talk about at Fresno State, we always talk, our president is big on saying, be bold. He always follows it up with be kind. Mm-hmm. And so right now we're all being bold. We're trying things differently. We're doing different things. But if you may also think about it, from a kindness perspective. I think it lessens tension. I think it helps everybody around you. And I know that it will come back to benefit you in the long run.
Thank you.
That was such a great answer that I feel very humble even wanting to say something afterwards, but to give it a shot. If you were if you were starting grad school at a non-COVID time, I think we would all encourage you to walk around our campus, to explore what there is, to walk into different offices, to learn what they do, ask lots of questions. So because that is probably not available on most campuses, I encourage you to look at websites, and most entities are offering more online options than ever before. And we're finding that the workshops that we are giving graduate students are being more attended than ever before, because no one has to find childcare, no one has to find a parking space, no one has to interrupt their day with something else. And I think that that there's a lot going on in the virtual world, and it's worthwhile looking at different websites to make sure that you're aware of what those are.
But can I also just point out that I'm hopeful that by the time the people who are seniors now matriculate, that things are going to be at least somewhat better. You know, we're talking about fall 21, and I'm hopeful myself, and maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I'm hopeful there will be a vaccine, and things won't be like it was 2 years ago, perhaps, but I'm feel pretty sure it's going to be better than it is right now.
So a couple of questions. Let me first address the one about mental health challenges. The student asked if you should be transparent. And let me say, I think you should deal with mental health kind of like, you know, diabetes. I think different people have different biases. I think it's important to treat all health the same. You've got HIPAA that protects you when it comes to your health. So I don't think it's a requirement to discuss your mental health challenges that you may have if you're, you know, if you have a particular medication. That would be something that kind of along the lines of maybe not directly as a disability, but you know, that you would get support for at the institution with your medical coverage. So I think it really depends upon the person, but that would be my suggestion. But to that, you know, items that may cause some anxiety, a couple of the questions are, you know, I feel like I'm bothering my professor. If I reach out to faculty so much, you know, I've only got one letter to get from, I have one faculty member in one class. Is there a proper way to approach them? I think, you know, again, recognizing that many McNair students, you know, may have that imposter syndrome and feel like, you know, it's me, I don't know. How would you advise them to reach out and get the support that they need to ensure their success?
Well, at the end of the day, we're all just people. And so I would encourage them to remember that and to reach out to their faculty, and of course be respectful, give them, you know, use their title, that sort of thing. Don't send them an Instagram message or Snapchat message, but address them professionally. And I think also that when someone doesn't respond, give them the benefit of the doubt, assume that they got busy with something and just let it slip through their email cracks, and contact them again. And if you have someone that repeatedly will not answer, you're going to find other faculty that will. So this is why we do what we do. Most of us do this because we really want to help students. So remember that. And like I said, if you send an email to a faculty member that they don't respond right away, give them the benefit of the doubt, reach out to them again, and you will find lots of faculty that really want to support you and really want to answer your questions.
one of the questions we didn't get to that I'd like us to address is, in addition to COVID-19 that's impacting us, given the pandemic, many communities, many locations are also very active when it comes to the protests, and addressing racial justice, Black Lives Matter, equity overall. Can you speak to what's going on your campus and your community? And I think the bigger question is, how will students, is there an environment where students will feel welcome? And what's happening with regards to some of those protests in your local areas?
So University of New Mexico is actively actually addressing some things like names of buildings. So I think that we're actively addressing a number of issues, and we certainly are doing everything we can to make people feel welcome. So there have been some organized protests that have started on campus and ended in downtown Albuquerque. We're a little sleepier than some of the large cities, but UNM is actively addressing climate issues and things like art and building names that might make some people feel uncomfortable.
I can say at Fresno State, we have a student chapter of the NAACP, and that student group rallied together and sponsored, for lack of a better term, a march in downtown Fresno. It was a peaceful demonstration that was carried widely by the media. And in fact, so much so it was picked up nationally, because at the time there were some not so peaceful activities going on in some cities. And so our students got national news by pulling this event together. Ended up being over 3,500 people. Now that was 3,500 people during the peak of the COVID situation. So surprisingly though, while they were all together, there was still an attempt at social distancing. There was everybody was wearing masks. There was still an attempt to protect each other's health, while also standing up for something that was important to them. And it was really inspiring, really inspiring. And that one event, I think, has changed the attitude of many in this community. Fresno is the 5th largest city in California. Many people don't realize. It is a big, big city. It's just surrounded by agriculture as far as you can see. But so we're a little bit of an island in that regard. But nevertheless, we have all the issues of large urban center. But that one event that was student-led really changed the community. And people are still talking about that and talking about it as a model for the way that we should continue to stand up for justice.
And I guess what I would add from Santa Barbara, I mean, we similarly had some, really excellent peaceful protests that have taken place in our community that our students have been a major part of. But one of the things that I've been really impressed by is the number of graduate student organizations within their departments who have gone to their departmental leadership and gone to their faculty and said, how can you change? What can you do to be able to really make a difference and to change this to a more inclusive environment? And the faculty have been listening. Things aren't perfect by any means, and I don't want to pretend that they are, but I think that the faculty are listening in a way that they never listened before. And I think that they're really starting to make some changes and really thinking through how they can shift things and really work with the students. And I think that those conversations are really inspiring and satisfying to know that finally people are really listening in a different way than they were previously. And I'm very hopeful that this is going to result in some really positive changes, especially around things like, having a more inclusive curriculum. That's one thing that's been a big topic of conversation.
Excellent. I'm going to ask our last question, and then we're going to do a close. And that comes from a McNair director. How do admissions committees feel about letters of recommendation from McNair directors? Wanted to make sure that those directors knew so they can write those strong letters. But what's your sentiments?
I think I'm the principal investigator for McNair on our campus, so I'm a little bit biased in that regard. But I think that just being a McNair student is an advantage. So identifying yourself in the application process as a McNair student is a big plus to me. To get that McNair director, the thing I would say to that director is just what I said earlier today. Personalize that letter to that individual student. Talk about that individual's strengths. Talk about that individual's opportunities for growth. And each of those students will have something a little bit different. So highlight that. It takes a little more time, but it certainly pays off when review committees look at those letters.
I wanted to focus your attention on the poll that we took just to let folks know in terms of the students. 74% were current undergrads, and 55 of those were continuing to go on in the fall. So there's definitely some drop off, and we can understand those concerns. 6% were kind of unsure, where 11 said that while they're recent grads, they're not enrolling in the fall. So we definitely understand the concerns, and that's why we organized this session with the deans. It's important to reach out to the deans to get an understanding of what's happening, at the institution that you seek to matriculate at, for your graduate program, but also keep these things in mind when it comes to the particulars. It's going to vary by institution, and that's all right. And to the point about recruitment, just so all of you know, we are still collecting information for the McNair Scholars Directory, and I have good word that there are a number of deans who are interested, as well as the Council for Graduate Schools, who distributes this to the deans within their communication. So be sure all McNair directors, you complete that with your students. We're not only looking for students who are graduating in the 2021, but students that may have graduated this past year, recognizing that some of the challenges given COVID may affect current graduates and those in their last year. Include them on the list as well. Otherwise, I'm going to merge them anyway, because we want to make sure that all of those scholars have success. In closing, I want to say thank you, but I want to ask if any of you deans would like to have a last word.
I just encourage everybody to keep learning.
Yeah, be kind.
That's right.
Stay safe.
All right. Thanks everyone for your participation, and thank you Dean Janetti, Dean Marshall, Dean Coonrod, as well as I have nothing but thanks and love for Suzanne at Council of Graduate Schools. Everyone stay safe, be kind, and keep learning. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Nicole.
Certainly, thank you.